We're on Vayeshev, and I would like to address a subject matter that that we haven't actually looked at. And I title this as a question: Joseph, a Tzadik or naive? Is it Tzadik or naive? And why do I say that is because we're going to find a pattern that makes me question the naivety of Joseph. The portion of Vayeshev relates to the sort of ups and downs of his life. He's beloved lad of his father. He went from being the beloved lad of his father to hated by his brothers, sold into slavery in Egypt, being thrown in prison. There he meets a cupbearer and a baker, and there the Torah readings ends, leaving us with the keen feeling of disappointment that the cupbearer forgets Joseph altogether. The narrative has a clear pattern of ups and downs, almost as if he is a marionette on a string. Now we know that that's not the case, but it just seems that way. And you'll notice the rhythm of ups and downs. First, you have Joseph, favorite son in his father's house. That's an up, wouldn't you say? Next is Joseph in the pit. I would say that's a downer. Sold by his brothers, most definitely a downer. Joseph, a success story in Potiphar's house. Wouldn't you call that an up? Joseph, success in prison. You could call that up because he's solving dreams. Joseph, forgotten once again in the pit. Down. Note especially how these travails are concretely reflected, the pit being either literally a hole in the ground or figuratively a dungeon. The climax and the end of the story of the alternate rise and fall of Joseph comes in Parshat Miketz, where his rise to the Egyptian throne is described. And Pharaoh further said these words in Genesis 41, and we'll see this in next week's Parsha. See that I've put you in charge of all of the land of Egypt. Now that's the ultimate up, right? You think, wow, is he just unlucky? Or was God trying to put him through a bunch of tests that he needed? What was going on? One can almost visualize Joseph, as I said before, as one who's on the end of a string like a marionette puppet being toyed with and brought here and there. This is not obviously what the biblical narrative says, and I'm not trying to point that out, but it just seems kind of odd to have so many very distinct ups and downs in life. I think we all have some ups and downs, but really that's some pretty drastic stuff. None of us have been through anything like that in our entire life, yet he maintained the highest level of peace and integrity about the whole thing. He didn't become a bitter human being. Most of us would have been extremely bitter about the time the cupbearer forgot us in the prison. But there is something, a certain aspect of his life that really causes me to say, what is it about his character, and what aspects of his character causes him to be in this situation over and over? That's why I titled it, was he in the situation because he was a Tzadik, or was he just naive? What do you mean? Let me explain. Joseph's character that finds an expression in the different stories as being naive and trust in people. He just had an innate trust in people. He did not sense intensity of hatred and jealousy felt toward him by his brothers. He did not believe that a person could actually lie and accuse someone falsely out of vengefulness. Potiphar's wife, he just couldn't even conceive the idea. Like, who would do something so terrible? And he did not think people were likely to be ingrates, like the chief cupbearer who decided, oh yeah, I got your back. As soon as he gets out, he forgets all about him. Well, these scenes in this week's Torah portion, Torah reading, we can understand better in the life of Joseph's innocence. What was it about Joseph that caused him to be in these very difficult situations? And I'm going to refer to, remember this, Nikius, in The Path of the Just. I'm going to bring up a section that's going to explain this, and I'll be right with you in a moment on that. When Joseph is sent to his father, by his father, to go find his brothers, where was he looking for his brothers? In Shechem, right? He is looking everywhere. Now, simply, he could have decided, I can't find them. So I just go back home, tell Pops, hey, they're not in Shechem. I don't know where they're at. Instead, it said that he looked and wandered in this place, in this location, that location. Finally, an angel tells him, or a messenger says, they've went north. Said that when he found them, and he was looking for them, he approached them with no qualms at all of thinking that his brothers hated his guts. Didn't even cross his mind that they would think, oh, here comes Joseph, the little pest, the tattletale, right? He never even conceived the idea that they wanted to kill him. Now, either he is very naive or he's a Tzadik. Just follow me. I'm not saying that you are not, but he can be both, okay? But I'm just saying he just seems to be a little bit naive. Now, you would expect that of a 17-year-old boy, maybe. Maybe a little naive, hadn't been through life's tough times. But he continues. Rav Eliezer said that he actually came praising them, saying great things about them. Hey, brothers, what's going on? He was excited to see them. Rashi said he came with praise and rejoicing. I'm so happy. We'll give him a hug. And I can see them as they're kind of hugging him, but like, oh man, the pest is here. We're like, we got to deal with this guy. Right? So naive. Joseph interchanged with Potiphar's wife also indicates a great level of naivete, right? Now think about this. Here you are a young, handsome, studly Jewish boy, and you've got Potiphar's wife hanging all over you, doting on you, smiling at you, flirting with you. And he's so naive, he doesn't even realize anything negative is about to happen till his clothes are ripped off of him. Now, listen, that's pretty naive, okay? Pretty naive. And then when he leaves, he can't even imagine that Potiphar's wife would lie and accuse him of rape. So couldn't even think of that. What's going on in this man's mind? He says, my master gives no thought to anything in his house, and all he owns he has placed in my hands. And the religious, how then could I do this most wicked thing and sin before God? So he couldn't even conceive of the fact. How could I do anything such a negative thing with my master's wife? Moreover, the fact that he came to Potiphar's house, none of the household being there inside, indicates that he suspected nothing and could not sense the impending danger. No one was in the house except for Potiphar's wife and he. Shouldn't there have been some kind of alarm that went off? Like he's there at the house, he's with her alone, and he smells her sweet perfume. He maybe, sees the candles on, who knows, petals floating in the tub. Why didn't he run, right? What was up with this guy? And then let's go to the jail. I want to look at the jail scene. In jail as well, Joseph did not lose his innocence and love for fellow man. He is in jail. If there's ever a point in which you could say, Joseph, now's a good time for you to become a bitter, angry man, because you've been falsely accused and thrown in prison. He doesn't. Note the charming scene in which he approaches the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, taking an interest of their emotional well-being. Why the downtrodden look? Why do you look so sad? Here he had such compassion on people that otherwise it was that class of people that he probably shouldn't have trusted. No further you could throw them. Yet he gives them attention and asks, why the downtrodden look? While solving the chief cupbearer's dream, Joseph asked him, in 3 days, Pharaoh will pardon you and restore you to your post. But then he says, but think of me when all is well with you and you are there again, and do me kindness of mentioning me to Pharaoh. So, as to free me from this place. Now we know there's some midrash that says the reason why Joseph stayed an additional 3 years was why? He asked the cupbearer instead of trusting Hashem. Has probably something to do with it. Joseph did not stop with this request. He continued to tell the reader already knows, for in truth I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, nor have I done anything here that they should have put me in the dungeon. So he's lamenting the fact that he's in prison and can't even understand who would do this to me. Nevertheless, Joseph's request was forgotten. Totally dropped it. Once again, a complete downer. Joseph is not simply a victim of circumstance beyond his control. His lack of awareness and insensitivity to evil that can be done in people were the main factors that got him in trouble. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, so follow. And as I'm going this, I want you to think, how does the path of the just and the idea of accuse of character traits, cleanliness of character traits, how this relates? You're going to see. Thus, we see a recurring pattern of a rise and fall as a result of a dominant trait in his personality. Joseph saw no evil in anyone because there was no guile in Joseph. I think that was said in the last Torah class, Thursday. Someone had mentioned that you tend to dislike the things you see in other people that are really reflections of who you are. The reason why Joseph couldn't see evil in his brothers, even their negative behavior, is he didn't have that in his own heart. I mean, at the deepest fundamental level, Joseph just couldn't conceive anything negative about another human being. Not even for a second thinking that this could happen, because it's just not in him. The sages called Joseph a saint. Called him a saint, Tzadik. One of the characteristics of a saint is inevitably to see evil in someone else, for such evil does not exist in the saint himself. This enables us to understand the pitfalls of Joseph, the innocent child who grew up as a pampered favorite. Indeed, as the story unfolds in the coming chapters, we see how Joseph, the lad, matured and became wiser and stronger, still not bitter and evil. Now, when we study the path of the just, with Rabbi Moshe Hamlazato, we examined the idea of accuse in character traits. What was accuse? Accuse is being defined as purity or cleanliness, meaning that you actually have purified yourself, very much in the same way that you sort of cashier your dishes or your silverware at the house by putting them in boiling water and making sure that all bacteria is destroyed in it. There is a accuse, a cleanliness of our character that is really important, meaning that not only do I not do evil to others and do positive mitzvah in my life, I also can't even conceive to do that negative. Now, the question that came up in last Torah portion, and which you guys dealt with Thursday, is can you ultimately destroy your evil inclination? And what is that? No, we can't. But we can harness it like a wild animal. It is very possible to take your character traits that are negative and harness it and put it in place to where it doesn't affect you. The Ramchal says the trait of a Tzadik, a righteous person, is one who not only does not do the bad or the negative, but doesn't even conceive of it. Couldn't even conceive of doing anything terrible Like, it doesn't even cross your mind to speak lashon hara against another person. It doesn't even cross your mind to steal from another person by speaking evil against that person. Wouldn't even cross your mind to betray another person. Just doesn't even cross your mind. And you would think, well, isn't that pretty normal that, if you're not an evil person, you just don't do evil things? True. But if we have accuse of our character traits, then it means that we actually begin to work at a level like Joseph. Joseph didn't have it in him to think that anybody could do any harm to him. And even when he had the opportunity to turn the tables on his brothers, what did he do? Sure, he did a few little conniving things, but he was testing them. He wanted to find out their mettle. Because the one thing that he matured in and became wise in is, yes, he was still that innocent, naive man that says, I could very easily let these guys take advantage of me again, because he couldn't even imagine his brothers even wanting to kill him, right? But he better test them. So I think the wisdom that is taught in this situation is that he developed his character traits. He became wiser at it. He was not suspicious of his brothers because he didn't have it in him. But he had to test them to see what their reaction was going to be between he and Benjamin, etc. And so he tested them. And later found out, when he had the opportunity to confront them and to make them all fall on their face in fear and trembling, he embraces them and says, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. He reveals himself to his brothers in such a loving way. Any other person would have found a way to really want them to pay a heavy toll and a heavy price. The Ramchal notes that he will limit his discussion. And by the way, if you have Path of the Just, I'm on page 131, chapter 11. The Ramchal devotes a final section in this chapter 11, Nichios, in character traits. And it says, just as one requires Nichios in his actions, so does one require Nichios in his or her character traits, the midots. One can almost say that it is more difficult to attain cleanliness in character traits than to attain it in action. Why is that? Why would you think it'd be more difficult to attain cleanliness in your character traits than to obtain it in your actions? Thank you. Right. So the external. You just do what you got to do. But the problem is nobody can see the internal. The external, everybody can see it. They can see when you're being an angry, caustic human being. And so just out of your own ego and pride, you might not, I probably shouldn't react that way. I'll hold myself back. All the while, you're an angry, bitter person on the inside. The nikius, the cleanliness that you have on the inside is very difficult. For human nature affects character traits more than it affects action. Since a person's makeup and disposition are great facilitators or great hindrances to specific character traits, which means that in order to perfect one's trait, one must often battle his natural inclination. Joseph had some level of supernatural inclination. I mean, what a righteous person. To not even think that it was possible. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't harm another person because he couldn't think that they would want to do that to him. So he had developed this internal perfection and purity. In any battle that is waged against one's natural inclination is bound to be a fierce battle. This is the idea that the sages of blessed memory expressed in Avos 4:1. Who is a truly strong person? One who conquers his or her evil inclination. What do we learn and what do we take back from this story of Joseph? Is that he had conquered. The reason why that so much was given to him in the end is because throughout all these situations or scenarios, he had plenty of opportunity to fall into an abyss of negative character traits, and he didn't. He maintained this highest level. I'll continue on. The Ramchal notes that he will limit his discussion only to a few character traits which are very important in this situation. Namely, those a sin of action in which people commonly stumble. These are the common stumbling blocks that was given to Joseph as well. It says, these traits are, number one, haughtiness. Second, anger. Third, envy. Fourth, desire. In each category that the Ramchal lists out here was Joseph handed the opportunity to bring those negative character traits to the highest level. One cannot know your internal character traits, how well you've purified them, until you've truly been tested. Until you've been destroyed by someone's lashon hara and you want to come out in vengefulness against that person, you will not know until you've been tested. You'll never know what it's like to not act upon your desire until you've been tempted in your life. He says, now these are all the negative character traits whose evil is manifest and well known. Pretty obvious. So that no proofs of their evil are necessary. For indeed, these traits are inherently wrong and also are harmful in their consequences. They are inherently wrong, for they are all outside the bounds of common sense and wisdom. You think these are the most common negative character traits that you could have. Though these can be fairly well dealt with in the physical sense, where you say, well, I don't want people to think that I'm haughty. So you put on an air of humility, while all the while you're very haughty and prideful. It's very difficult to handle these character traits. The question that I would have to propose now is, as a person that you've gone through your own tests in your life, what character traits do you feel could be improved on or polished or modified so that not only you not do them physically, but you don't even do them mentally, psychologically? I can guarantee you that if Joseph had any of these character traits in him, these negative character traits, he would have failed in one, if not all, of these situations. What makes Joseph wiser and stronger and a Tzadik? And yes, I did say naive to kind of pull the psychological strings, but there was some naivety to him. He had some naive levels, almost innocent levels, but there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a level of innocence in your heart that you couldn't conceive of somebody else hurting you. Now, I'm going to tell you, I probably would say that I'm far away from that than what most people think. Let me explain to you. I was in the military. I served in the Gulf War. I was a law enforcement officer. And if there's anything I'm not, is naive. I'm just going to be straight up with you. And the reason why this is such a real subject matter to me is that I found myself living in a very bifurcated world. Let me understand what I mean. I have the one side of Rod Bryant, who doesn't trust anybody. I'm just be straight up. And believes that most people, if they have the opportunity, will stick you in the back and knife you. Emotionally, whatever, even physically. I'm the kind of guy that changes his patterns when he drives. Will not drive home the same way. I drive a different route home just about every night, every day. I'm the type of guy that goes to my house, and when I pull in the cul-de-sac, I drive the whole cul-de-sac so I can see around the house. And sometimes I go through the back door instead of the front door. And you think, boy, Rod, you have some problems. So, deep within inside of me, I'm not naive. And maybe it's because I have seen things that I've seen the worst in people, especially in law enforcement, the worst in people. I used to think that I knew what sin was and how terrible sin was. Until I got into law enforcement, I can tell you right now, I had no idea. When I know what evil is now, and evil is not a guy wearing a muscle shirt. Evil's not, a woman who smokes a cigarette. What evil is a brutal rape and murder of an individual and then crushing their head in with a cinder block. That's evil. You see, you tend to lose your naive outlook on life when you see that kind of stuff. So even though I'm still very much challenged in the physical world, I've had to purify my mindset. Not to say, oh, well, this never happened to me, or no one could ever do this to me. It's not that. It's just that I now have to realize, just because I know that other people are capable of doing that, there's no way that I would ever want to do that to someone else. That's the change. That's the difference. I couldn't imagine cheating on my spouse. I couldn't even fathom the idea of doing something like that to my spouse. Or stealing from someone. Just the idea, like, that crawls all over me and galls my inner character. But I've had to work hard to get to that place, because if you're not careful, your situation can harden you more than help you. And in Joseph's cases, I read this and I said, truly a Tzadik, truly a Tzadik. I mentioned to my wife, I said, sometimes I lament the loss of innocence that I see that some people like Joseph maintained. He was able to maintain it through all that ordeal. It's a real Tzadik. And yet many of us have lost our innocence in whatever situation it is in your life, and you find yourself now in the latter years trying to do internal repair and sort of somehow form your mind to a more positive spiritual level. This is the use and the power of Torah. Torah does heal the mind and heal the soul. That concludes the Shurim. I pray that your life is full of joy, and Hanukkah is coming up soon, and I wish you all a happy Hanukkah. Any questions?